when we are doing screen wrinkles that still need to be ironed out. So, are we online?
We are on and live now.
Okay, perfect. So there's a few wrinkles that still need to be ironed out. So I expect in this class to get a lot of questions that I may not know the answers to. So, excuse me, Colin and Michelle are going to help be writing down questions so we can get the answers back to you. But I've been asking a lot of people a lot of questions and there's not a lot of clarity yet. So I don't love that part, but I think we can position ourselves well enough to at least be on the safe side. Okay. So let's jump in and get started. Thank you everyone for coming to the new law and forms class. So we are going to be offering this class. Today's class 1. You don't have to attend multiple sessions, but our goal is to offer this class 3 more times by the end of the year. John L. Scott Corporate will also be, they are working on a 3 clock hours class with Aaron Variano, the attorney, but it's not approved, it's not scheduled, but that should be coming in December. The MLS also offers a 3 clock hour class, which I really enjoyed. Michelle liked it. It was a lot, seemed more simple than the class we took with Annie Fitzsimmons. So basically what we did is I compiled everything that I could learn from the Annie class, the MLS class, and then did some of my own research for some best practices. So Colin is here to help for people online. And sorry, I'm gonna behind me just because it's a habit. So if you guys have questions online, please help. But we're gonna jump in. First and foremost, to be off topic for a minute, we are having a Husky Cougar clothing drive or blanket and coat drive. And it saddens me that the Cougars are winning a lot. So Huskies, we'll get some blankets and some coats and fill up our Husky bin because we're having a great season on the football field and we're doing horrible for our clothing drive. So please, Huskies, help us out. All right. So everybody, I don't generally give you notes, but I'm trying so hard to simplify. And so I felt it would just be easier for you to kind of have this in front of you. So just to start a preview of what we are going to go over today. Part of the new laws is that real estate firms are required to have a written broker service agreement. We are all learning kind of new names for things. So I'm going to tell you right now that I'm probably going to fumble them a few times. Okay. It's kind of like we are leaving the world of commission and going to compensation. Okay. So we are now going to have broker service agreements. We are switching from the term dual agent to limited dual agent. Okay. And if that happens, both parties must consent. Okay. That's very, very clear. Complete transparency regarding compensation. Okay. That's a huge one. And this one irks me because there's no actual title, but it's modernizing and simplifying the real estate broker in Washington, which is the former law of agency. So the former law of agency, you know, it used to look like that nice little formal booklet, is now going to be 4 pages, but there's no title. There's no number to associate it with. So I'm just probably going to keep calling it the, agency law brochure, just for simplicity. All right. So there's a lot of changes and it's kind of scary, I think. However, I think whenever there's a shift, it creates opportunities. And I wanted to start with how you could take opportunities for what is actually happening. You have an opportunity to dominate if you have a stellar buyer consultation. You have to have that now. It's imperative in your business to sit down with a buyer and show your value. Educate them on why it's so important to have representation. If you do that and you do that successfully, all of these things are going to be a non-issue. Okay, so that is an opportunity. Educate. On the legal lunch with John Hunter and John L. Scott's in-house counsel, Aaron Variano, the manager asked, what's the news going to say about this? Well, it's probably not going to be in our favor if they say anything at all. So this is your opportunity to educate your people. You can do videos. You can write a great letter. You need to know enough about this to say, hey, Rashay, have you heard about these new laws? If you have questions, let me know. And that may trigger Rashay to ask me some questions. Because all they're hearing on the news is buyer wins $9 billion in the lawsuit against, all the realtors and the realtor associations. They're just hearing the headlines. There's something going around social media right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it printed so I can see it bigger. But it's basically all the things a broker does. And there's like a few hundred of them.
I have this. I have them.
So something like that, just like when you go into a listing appointment, you don't think twice about having to show your value, right? You have to show your marketing plan, your pricing strategy, everything you plan on doing. You better get there and show your value. Now it's the same thing. It's just transferred to a buyer. Okay. This process will also ensure that you're not wasting time with a buyer, right? I know that there's probably some angst about, what if they don't want to sign it? Well, if you go on a date and they don't call you back, what does that mean? Right? So I know we got to do a little dance a little bit with some buyers, and that's okay. I don't want you to not dance with them. You can do that. But if somebody is adamant, not willing to sign it, that says a lot about the relationship that they want to have with you. An attorney, if you've ever hired an attorney always has to have an engagement letter. So if Brad is my attorney, before I hire Brad and Brad decides to work with me, he has to give me a letter of an engagement. And that is going to talk about the scope of how he's going to represent me and what the fee structure is. And we all know that our license is a limited license to practice law. So when you're feeling uneasy about this, remember, we have a limited license to practice law. An attorney has to have an engagement letter. So this is just our first step to professionally working with everyone. Roche would never, ever list a house without a listing agreement. She wouldn't do it. Why would she waste her time and energy and money and not have a contract in place? So you just have to take that mindset and transfer that to working with a buyer. All right. So changes, and you have notes, and then you have some other things in your packet, highlighted forms. The changes: to receive compensation for rendering real estate services, you must have a broker service agreement, which means you have to have a listing agreement or a buyer brokerage service agreement, which is formerly known as a buyer agency agreement. So the firm does not get paid without one of those two things, okay? You have to have it signed before you're in a contract or when reasonably practical, okay? So that before a contract is signed, that is a hard line in the sand. You can never accept an offer on a house and then sign the listing agreement afterwards, right? You have to have that listing agreement signed before. So if you're going to be working with a buyer, you can't get mutual and then get that signed. There's a very clear chain of events that have to occur with these new law changes. The agency law brochure, the brokerage service agreement, and then the contract. Okay, so whether it's a listing agreement or a buyer broker service agreement, then your purchase and sale. Okay, so those three steps have to happen. So what does reasonably practical mean? Because that is the $1 million question. There isn't an answer. Okay, it has to be reasonably practical or depending on the individual situation. Okay, so I know that a lot of us like this way or that way. Like we like it cut and dry. However, cut and dry sometimes isn't good. There's nothing in the listing agreement that says within 5 days of meeting with the seller and giving them a price opinion of the house, you have to make a decision to work with one another or not. So I do think, just to give it a bit of a different perspective, if they would have come out and said, hey, you need to have this signed within 48 hours of talking to a buyer, I think that would have been heavier. Okay. So just realize, I know reasonably practical sounds a little bit scary, but you do have to use your best judgment, and we'll help you with some guided scenarios with that. And then taking, yes,
I know this is gonna be like, there's no clear answer to it, but like, I have quite a few people that were working for this year that put off their buying for next year. And they're like, oh, I decided to lease it till like June. So they're not gonna start looking till June, but I have worked with them this year. Do I have to be like, hey, we gotta get signed by January, or do I wait till they're closer to actually starting to look?
wait till they're starting to look.
Okay, that's it.
Absolutely.
I was gonna call everybody and be like, hey, you gotta meet before January 1st.
Yeah.
Yes,
So all the agents have to do this. So,
all,
we're not doing anything different. We're competing against other agents on making the best presentation on this service agreement. Just like on a listing appointment. So
exactly.
it's not like somebody can go, well, you can work with me and not have to sign it. So this isn't.
There's an RCW. This is law.
Yeah, this is,
Okay. There's statute for it now.
Yeah.
It's just like a Form 17
Yeah.
or a lead-based paint agenda. Okay. Taking account the circumstances of an individual. Okay, we're going to talk about having good, clean paper trails because we can't control what the other party does or doesn't do. Okay, but we want to make sure we have a paper trail to show what we're doing. Buyer broker service agreement. Okay, so if you can flip to, oh, I grabbed, yeah, sorry, I grabbed my legal bulletin. Okay, so usually when we teach new forms classes, I'm a fan of the red lines, right? The MLS goes through and they red line out all the changes they made. I did not do that because the whole form is red line. Okay, so I basically went through and highlighted the major changes that you need to know. Okay, so the term, this is really important. The term of working with a buyer, the default is 60 days. Why this is so important is Stephen comes to my open house, and I need to backpedal for a minute. We're going to do scenarios at the end because that's going to be where it snowballs. But I'm going to give little tips and tricks along the way. So Stephen comes into my open house. He wants to see properties later that afternoon. I'm like, hey, listen, I need you to sign this. And he's a little on the fence. I could just say one day. But Stephen wants me and he's going to work with me and he's just getting started. So I could say 120 days. So you need to use this time frame as your advantage. And you can shift your conversation with the buyer. If they're really skittish and they don't want to sign anything, make it a day or two. Does that make sense? Going down to the pamphlet, which is the former law of agency. Apparently they refer to it as the pamphlet. The buyer acknowledges receipt of this. Okay, now remember, your agency law or your pamphlet has to be given ahead of time. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to go about this. There's no signature spot or initial spot. It would have made it a little bit easier. You could email this and then ask for, please confirm receipt. That will be my go-to practice, is to email this ahead of time and ask for them to confirm receipt. But it does say that they are confirming receipt on here. Then you get into who the buyer broker is. And this part isn't highlighted. Sorry about that. Agency relationship, exclusive versus non-exclusive. A lot of advice that is being given to me, and we're going to go back to the scenario with Stephen at an open house, and he doesn't really want to sign a contract. I could just say, hey, Stephen, let's do it non-exclusive. Which means Stephen can have as many non-exclusive contracts as he wants. Now, this is going to be what's your best judgment. I personally am taking my manager hat off. I'm not putting a lot of time and energy into a client that I'm not exclusive with, right? I like one person, I'm your person, you're my person. That's the direction we're going to go. But if you just wanted a 1 or 2 day type of situation and you wanted to be non-exclusive, just to feel like you're being compliant, that's something you can do, and then you can amend it later. Okay? Limited dual agency, okay? This is something that if initialed below. Now, if this is real heavy and you don't want to get into it with your new potential buyer, they can come back and sign this at a later time, but it has to be before any dual agency actually takes place. Firm limited dual agency, they understand that if I represent Stephen and Rashay represents Brad, and we're all John L. Scott, Michelle's dual broker now. Okay. Compensation. You need to go through and decide how you want to conduct your business. Okay. There's no right or wrong way. I'm not going to say you have to do it this way or you should do it that way. But you should know, what do you feel? We're a referral service. We are not a discount firm. But how are you going to present the compensation to your buyer? It could just be as simple as, Rashay, we're going to look at properties and, I'll collect the commission that the seller is offering. Or if you are a bit more of a stickler, which is not a bad thing, and I say, Rashay, I'm a 3% broker. So if a house that you want to look at is only offering 2%, you're going to then be responsible for that additional commission, or we'll have to negotiate that with the seller. Okay. So you have to decide what is your business practice for that. Yes.
Do you want to wait till the end for questions, or if it applies to this, ask them now?
Sure, go for it.
So are you seeing that there's going to be listings that will have a very low buyer?
So I'm not seeing a trend, unless you're Lennar.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing a trend, but this was 2 Octobers ago, I think, where commission could be 0. Now, the day before that change, it was October 3rd of 21-ish,
Yes,
or
right.
2. The day before, commission could be $1. Okay, so that's not changing, but if Vu, my buyer, wants to go see a Lennar home, I already know it's a 0 SOC. So I should talk to Vu about that. The whole point of this is complete transparency with compensation. Don't let it scare you, because here's the thing. Vu is less scary to me as a buyer because we're talking about how much the seller is going to pay me.
Mhm.
Rashay is a seller, and I'm able to go in there and tell her that my rate that I charge is 6%. So if you're getting in your head about this, realize this whole time you've been going to a seller, asking the seller to pay you this money. Now I'm just going to my buyer saying this is how it works, and the seller's going to pay. So do you see the difference there? We got no problem asking the seller to pay the 6%.
I'm putting on the
Sure.
dual agency, since we're on a team, we like have a team member help someone, we never do it, but did I just cross it out over 0, or just put like on I guess on B?
Well, no, we're gonna double check this. Can we write this down for teams? I don't know. Michelle's gonna write.
Okay.
From where I stand right now, none of you are dual. Because I would be dual if you and Wynn were representing opposite parties.
Yeah.
I'm the dual, not you guys.
Okay.
But we will
I
double
had
check
something
that for
recently where-
teams.
Yeah, I was a listing agent, but I missed my own house, I referred to my brother, and they were like, is that dual agency?
Yeah, good question. Well, the fact that your twins probably doesn't help because are you I've asked myself that question a few
Yeah.
times. So
Hey,
we'll double
Shy. Shy, it's Jamal. Can I ask a quick question?
yes.
So in the meeting, Annie was going over like the litigation regarding buyer's agents saying, don't worry about it. It's the seller that pays me. And that was part of the issue. Is now that we are separating the two, like either the buyer's going to compensate me or the seller's going to compensate me. Is it okay now to use that language to say to the buyer, hey, don't worry about it. I'll just charge you $0 because I know the seller is going to pay me. Is that now acceptable language?
Well, no, because you don't know if the seller's gonna pay you, so I guess you have to decide, I mean, if it's Lennar, I can assure you they're not paying you. So you need to kind of know up front, how are you gonna handle, and we're not there yet in the contract, about showing properties that offer no commission. Now, a buyer can choose, if, let's say I have a 41 signed with Riche and I have 3%, Riche can say, hey, broker, don't show me anything under 3. Or show me stuff at 2+ and I could make the difference if I need to. So again, this is all about transparency, but saying, oh, buyer, don't worry about it, the seller's going to pay it, that's not a guarantee. I guess my example when I was saying that, Jamal, was more of, in a mindset, I can go to a listing appointment and ask a seller to pay me whatever my rate is, but I don't want you to get nervous talking to a buyer about it when it's probably a lot easier of a conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I was just getting hung up on the fine point. On January 2nd, if I go on the MLS and my buyer wants to see this house and the SOC is 2.5%, I can tell my buyer the seller is paying me that money, not you, which was part of the litigation that Annie was talking about.
Well, yeah, and if you look at paragraph 6, section C, are we on page 2 yet?
We are now.
So see, section C says seller offer less than commission. So if I had, I'm not supposed to say there's no standard rate, right? But let's say my standard rate was 3% hypothetically. Jamal, I'm going to say, hey, buyer, what do we want to do in the event that the seller is offering less than the amount we agreed upon? So it's already agreed upon of what you guys are going to do. But just like refreshing your listing presentation, you need to refresh your buyer presentation. Okay. But it spells it out. I mean, it's not complicated, because if the seller is offering equal commission, what if the seller is offering more commission than what we agreed to? Then what happens, buyer? Then what if the seller is offering less commission? So it makes it very simple to have the conversation. You have to know what your business practice is.
Oh,
Gotcha.
okay.
Thanks.
Does that help?
No, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. Riche.
So on 6C, so if I have on my form. Okay, never, I got it, my question.
Okay. Now we have compensation terms, right? Because there's a lot of jargon. This is just to help simplify. Showings listings for VAs. So 8A, showing property. Buyer broker shall or shall not be obligated to show properties to buyer for which there is no selling offer or buyer has not agreed to pay the compensation. So Brad is my buyer, and Brad and I agreed to Shy's rate of 3%. And Brad wants to go look at a Lennar home. Well, it's already going to tell me what we agreed upon. Now, if Brad says, okay, Shy, I really like this house, I'm going to ask mom and dad for some extra money because I really want to work with you. Then there's an amendment that we can use to change this. Okay, Colin.
So on number 5, like compensation, can't we just put other and then as indicated by MLS?
You can, but what if, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. What if it's a Lennar home and the MLS says 0?
Then you get paid 0.
Okay, and that's fine if that's your practice.
Right?
That's fine. We had a broker, Michelle and I were working with a few weeks ago that it was a VA buyer and they couldn't pay the difference. And this broker worked tirelessly and she eventually figured it out of how to make it happen. So everybody's gonna have their different ways to go about it. As long as you're legal, I'm good with it. And we're full service. Okay, Jerry,
On this Lennar, has anybody done a transaction with them? Will they allow the negotiation? How
No.
do they-
No,
Okay,
they're on, just tell your buyer they're on their own.
enough said.
I've called the city after that.
Yeah, okay.
okay, so along with your broker service agreement. Another new form is a 53, okay? So it used to be if I have a buyer agency agreement with someone and I don't want to work with them or they don't want to work with me, they could just send me a text or email and that was fine, that circle's closed. No more. Now there is a contract terminating your agency relationship. So Roché's a pain. All she wants to do is look at Lennar. I don't want to work with her anymore, but we already have a 41 signed. I need to get this 53 signed. Or vice versa. Roché doesn't want to work with me anymore. But we all know that sometimes clients can dig their heels in and they don't always cooperate. So a best practice, in my opinion, is if neither one of us want to work with each other, I need to fill this out and I need to send this to the buyer. That's my duty. Now, I can't force her to sign this. So you need to save that sent email asking for this to be signed. Okay?
Sorry, Bernie, one question. What happens if you're currently working with someone that doesn't wanna, like, say it's January 1st is coming up, you're currently working with them and, they don't wanna like work with you anymore, things like that. Do you have to sign anything?
No. Everything that we're talking about
It's
takes
true.
effect January 1st. For sure.
Question, so I'm looking at the amendment here, so if I'm in a transaction, my buyer's agency or service agreement is signed and we're on our way to closing. And somehow, some way, we need to credit the buyer some money out of our commission to close. Let's just say it's $500 for the sake of this conversation, so it changes the commission. Do we have to go back and use this amendment, or is it just fine the way that we are always?
As long as everybody agrees to it,
Okay.
that's what's, I think if you were getting into a situation where the buyer's coming out of pocket,
Oh, okay.
then I would recommend an amendment. But if you're helping the buyer out and all parties agree to it, I think you're okay.
Okay, well, no.
Okay. Next form is the amendment, which is 41A.
It got a little out of order, guys. It was the
No.
form.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So 41A, this is really gonna be an important form, okay? Because like in the beginning, when we were talking about different scenarios where I meet Stephen at an open house and I just want him to sign this for 2 days. And then he decides he really wants to work with me and I have him come in for a buyer consultation and I show my value and the importance of representation. I am going to amend, maybe I originally signed a non-exclusive 2-day agreement. Well, now I may amend that to an exclusive 120-day agreement. Okay, so look at it as being a little bit fluid with this 41A. So you can extend the term.
So sorry,
This is
so like,
what
I'm
we're
just like,
for.
on our team, we're in a team, and like one of us is out of town, and then like, when the other person shows the house and has to write the offer, would that be where I put co-broker?
Yes. And that's gonna be imperative. That they're actually doing away with the sub-agent contract that they had. I believe it was a
So pretty much
1X.
you're like working with someone, then you're like, I'm gonna be out of town, let's amend this by signing the co-broker.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. You know how we use a Form 19 a lot? I have a feeling this is gonna be used a lot. Okay? You can change your relationship, exclusive to non-exclusive or vice versa. Agency and co-brokers. Okay, that's really important. Limited dual agency. So I'm showing this buyer all of these properties and nothing's working. And I happen to put a new listing on the market this week. And I'm like, hey buyer, I think I might have a property for you. Before I show you, I need to know that you understand what limited dual agency means. And hey seller, before I show my buyer, I need you to sign this also. Okay, different form, but they have to sign it ahead of time. You have to understand the importance of ahead of time. And then compensation, if the compensation is going to be adjusted, okay? So the 41A is the amendment to the 41. Questions? Brad?
So back to the agency and co-buyer broker, if like your example, right, where somebody else is gonna go show houses for the weekend time out of town. Doesn't that broker also need to sign this form? Shouldn't there be a line there? Because they're now part of the contract.
Let's write that down. That's a good, oh, sorry, Michelle's writing.
So if I'm gonna do like a sub agent, right, so the co-broker, wouldn't they also need to sign this? Accepting that, they're gonna, for however many days they're gonna show houses for me. while I'm-
I mean,
Oh, like the-
I think it's
Oh,
just the
like
buyer
the
broker
bid,
signature.
okay.
That's me.
And whoever's opening the door for
So
you
we
while
don't
you're gone.
need to sign, right?
Well, you probably signed the original. This is an amendment adding someone. But we
Okay.
will get clarification.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
at least to everybody who's here.
Oh,
Okay. I believe it's just gonna be the new broker that signs it, but we will find out.
And that was up to the buyer every time. If someone's using a showing agent,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly. That's what I'm
And
thinking
showing
too.
agent is different every time. So, well.
Sucks for Redfin.
Oh, that's funny, all right.
Oh, okay, so if I'm using a showing agent, they have to sign this amendment.
Because they're really cracking down on broker services, okay? And opening a door, showing a house is broker services.
Well, it's kind of interesting. This says to represent buyer with buyer broker. So it's like,
Yeah,
But technically you are
yeah, they're
So if-
representing you too.
with
Yeah.
You.
so you have a broker.
So for
service
the
agreement.
sake of this conversation, if you were a team and you know that you had a showing agent person, or just say like me, and then I wanted an agent to show.
Yeah.
Up front, so in my buyer's presentation, do I say, hey, Shy, either myself or one of my showing agents, Boo, is going to show you homes, and so to cut down on all paperwork moving forward, just in case Boo is going to be able to show you homes or step in for me, I'm gonna have you sign this one as well. So
But-
it could be,
I would, and we're gonna get clarification on this, but I would already have my verbiage in. Now, this is the Form 41, so the buyer service agreement, the BSA. That's what I'm trying to get in my head,
I guess
BSA.
other.
Add to the other.
There's an other on paragraph 14. So if I'm
Oh,
Rashay and I have a team and I have a showing broker and a buyer broker, I'm gonna put, and we'll get verbiage for you, but I would have that already prepared in my consultation.
That's an even better
including-
example of what I was asking, then wouldn't they then need to sign the showing, your showing agent would need to sign this thing too? right?
Yeah, we'll find out.
yeah, okay.
So what happens if you get like, say you have a client forever and, they start to. They're curious, they wanna know what's going on with the Margot, that, they're not like fully in yet, but, they wanna go check out a house. Hey, Boo, can you show us a house? What's up, you gotta get them all this stuff, signed? Just so-
Well,
Sign on one day or?
before or within reasonably practical amount of time. But at the end, we're gonna go through a lot of scenarios.
Okay,
So we went through basically the Form 41, 41A, the 53. Okay, these are the doozies, right? This is the new buyer agency agreement, the amendment and the termination, okay? The other forms, 41C is a compensation disclosure.
42.
Sorry, 42C. If you receive any money outside, any compensation outside paid as offered, this has to be in the contract. So what do I mean by that? Let's say a listing broker offers additional compensation if you write a full price offer by this date. Right? I know some of you have never seen that market before, but that's a strategy that we've used. Okay? Or what if the seller receives 5 offers and one of the offers is going to give a kickback to the LOC? What if the SOC credits the LOC some money? You need a 42C. Okay, so any kind of compensation outside of the scope of paid as offered, you have to have this. Yes.
No, you go first, guys. It's probably the same question.
Maybe, maybe not. So so in the multiple offer situation, like you said, the SOC is paying the LOC, is that illegal? Because that means I'm getting a kickback for taking your offer.
Well, as long as all parties are aware,
Right.
the buyers
Money.
are aware because they wrote the offer. And your sellers will be aware because they're signing it. So your
But that's not
sellers,
fair to the other offers. If I say, if this is in agreement, and so I say if SOC is crediting the LOC 25% of their commission, then isn't it like, well, why are they doing that?
well, I agree. I'm not saying I would do it.
Right, okay.
But if the opportunity presented itself, I was trying to think of a scenario of when you would receive money outside paid as offered.
Okay.
But I agree, but maybe that offer is in the seller's best interest. And you get a benefit from it, get your paper signed.
Okay.
Is there? So I'm thinking back to when builders actually needed brokers and they used to offer.
Like yesterday.
I know. They used to offer incentives like gift cards, come
Yeah.
show Starbucks cards, $50 El Gaucho card. Where's the line on what has to be disclosed? So if you just bring them, yeah, like where's that?
Let's
Okay.
write that question down. I personally, okay, I got my broker hat on. Because of what we're seeing in the world and everyone wants the utmost transparency with compensation, I got nothing to hide. So there's an other box on the 42C. So I would probably err on the side of caution and put, I got a $500 gift card for showing you this property. Or getting into mutual acceptance or something like that. But it has to be compensation. But that's me being very conservative and I have nothing to hide. So I'm gonna let's sign the contract.
That would be before the closing, correct?
Yeah, so I guess
So.
Bad
so
example.
I've had clients send me, dinner certificate after it close. I don't have to.
that's not compensation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this goes with the purchase and sell agreement before we close, is that somebody in this transaction is giving me a little something, something.
So just wait till the closing of that.
Yeah,
Slide right here.
All right.
Dude, we're recording.
Example what not to do.
Yeah.
All right, so now we have our listing agreement, okay? This is one of these. Now, your listing agreement is a broker service agreement. So just like, and I do not want to go down this rabbit hole, but just like the broker service agreement, the buyer broker service agreement, your listing agreement is your broker service agreement. Okay? Which has to be done before or within a reasonable practical amount of time. What does that mean? There's no definition. It's all the same. But when I have you sign this, my potential seller, I gotta be on the market in 30 days. Okay, so you don't have to have a listing agreement signed to do a CMA and to do a listing presentation. But if Rashay is saying she wants to work with me, and I'm over there advising her on how to stage her home and we're already photography, you should already have this signed. Okay, so don't complicate it. But there is a chance the MLS is going to extend out this 30-day period of time. That's what the rumor is, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
But you can also put a letter to this too, like, you know, if it's past the 30 days because they're doing a remodel or
Mhm.
whatever, market ready, blah, 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 right?
Yeah, you've always been able to write a letter to the MLS.
Yeah.
And say there's extenuating circumstances, and that's why the list date goes beyond the 30-day period of time. Okay,
I feel like we, sorry. No, I just feel like, it doesn't, it's, but I just feel like that, 30 days is, sometimes it's
Yeah.
before and you can like, hey, be prepared to list it within 6 months. We should do these things and.
I agree.
So, so write a letter, Yeah, that's what we'll always do that.
So what I've done is I've changed the date. Where it says within 60 days. So now, cause I've never done that letter. Thank you for sharing that with me.
You mean 30 days?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, or 30 days, because. It takes 30 days to get a.
I agree. You have to do the letter because otherwise you have a conflict within your contract.
Okay,
Because
so.
one thing says 30 days, one thing has a date beyond 30 days.
So we don't have to get anything changed on here. We just need to do the letter to the MLS.
Yeah, that's not part of the class. That's just
Yeah.
kind of an old school thing we've
Yeah.
done.
I got it.
I'm just more so giving you a heads up that there's talk the MLS is going to extend this time frame. So back to the limited dual agency. Again, transparency. If initialed below, the seller will consent. Okay, I know that we have the muscle memory of there's an initial spot, initial it. This is where you pause. It does not have to be initialed. If it is initialed, you better make sure your client knows what limited dual agency is. Because that's where you're going to get yourself in a little bit of trouble where they initialed it, you become dual agent, and they're like, wait a minute, they didn't tell me about this. Here's another change on paragraph 5. It is highlighted to address any privacy or similar concern. Seller may instruct the listing broker to limit marketing by not displaying the property address or map location on the internet, by eliminating any and all internet advertising, and by opposing specific showing requirements and other similar restrictions. This has always been implied. Now it's just in writing.
Wait,
Okay.
what's that for?
What's that?
What's that section for?
If a seller wants you to limit your marketing or any type of showing for privacy issues.
Didn't that used to, especially with like address and stuff, you had to provide a reason? Is this now the seller just says the reason is because I said so?
Well, so two different things.
Okay.
The listing agreement is giving transparency to the seller of their options. You would then have to fill out additional forms if you wanted restrictions on the showings. I believe it's a 7D.
Well, yeah, but not even restrictions for showings. Like if they said, well, I don't want people walking through my house all the time, so I want to limit people coming through. I don't want them driving by. I just don't want to have my address up there. And they've done that in the past when it's like
Bill Gates.
or Russell Wilson or whatever. But they used to have a pretty firm line that like, unless it's that scenario, or it's like an adult family home where there's an employee situation, no, we're not doing that.
Well, now it says you can't.
Okay.
Multiple listing service, they added phrasing subject to restriction imposed by seller. Now, we all know, we've all had that seller that's like, I don't want a key box. Well, if you're good at what you do, you show them the value of the key box, and then you create whatever environment you need to give them the safety that they are concerned about. So just because it says it doesn't mean you have to just go along and do that. Paragraph 15 is important, okay? Damages in the event of a buyer's breach. This is going to determine what happens to the earnest money. In the event seller retains earnest money as liquid damages on a buyer's breach, any cost advanced or committed by firm on seller's behalf shall be paid. Okay, that's important. And the balance shall be retained by the seller, divided equally between seller and the firm. And it's retained by the seller if not checked. Okay, so that's a really important thing of what happens to earnest money. And then you can see at the bottom, there is now always, but it's a little different, phone number and email address, but now it's your license number. Okay, make sure the lines are all filled out. Let's try not to skip. Okay. 18. Lots of changes on the Form 18. So the Form 18 is not new. This has always been an amendment to the listing agreement. Okay. So the term extended. Okay. Basically, if you want to extend your listing period. Okay. Your list price. Agency and co-listing broker for a team. This is where you might need that. At this point, you do not need that to have others conduct open houses for you. Limited dual agency. Okay, let's say they signed the first on the listing agreement and now they changed their mind or vice versa. And then co-listing broker as a limited dual broker. Okay. Shay.
So no more Form 19.
There still is a Form 19. So Michelle had actually asked me this a few weeks ago. We always want to make sure we're in alignment with our training. And I have always trained that when you do a price reduction or any, you always use Form 19. Michelle's always used a Form 18. You can do both, but honestly, the Form 18 now for extending your listing period or your price adjustment, anything along those lines, I mean, you could still use both.
Okay, so then in regards to that, to say that I'm gonna use a Form 19 and I'm gonna temporarily take the home off of the market. Now I'm gonna put it back on the market because I used to could use the Form 19 to say temporarily off of the market and mark back on market date on that form.
Yeah.
So in the good practice is what you're saying is that I should use a Form 19 for a temporarily off market and a Form 18 to extend out or put it back on the market. And if it's a price change,
Well, this is different. You're gonna need a 19 to go back on the market
well, yeah,
because the 18 doesn't do that.
right.
But an 18 will allow you to extend it, your list date, but so will the 19.
That's what I'm saying.
So this is one of those things where if you look at like a financing contingency, you can do things a few different ways. This is gonna be the same thing.
Okay,
I'll probably keep using a 19 because I'm old school and that's just what works for me and it gives me more options. But Michelle likes an 18 and there's nothing wrong with that, especially since they added some things. Now, when you have to use an 18 and you can't use a 19 is if they're going to change the limited dual agency or if the co-listing broker is going to be a limited dual. So that is not addressed on the 19.
If you're doing anything where the multiple is changing the status for you, you need a 19. So if temporary off market has to be a 19, cancellation, you need a 19.
back on market.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's-
anything where they're doing it, they just say you have to have a period. Yeah.
And 18, I mean, just to simplify, is for an active listing. I'm extending the date. I'm amending the price. We're gonna change the receipt of dual broker information, that type of thing.
That's a quick question about that limited. So. We have a buyer that comes and says, hey, I'll work with you if you, give me something. And I never liked doing a dual agency, so I just didn't represent them. I still just represented the seller. And then always added attorney review and wrote in there, you've been advised to seek legal, all that stuff. Is that out now?
Why? Why would it be?
Well, I just want, because I didn't see anything like, so
You can still give referrals. A question though that I'd like to write down, now that we're talking through it, is you represent the seller. I don't want to confuse, but this is a question I just thought of. Jerry represents the seller. A buyer comes in to open his open house and he says, hey, Shy, I don't want to be dual. Represent this buyer, give me a 25% referral fee. I believe you then have to have a 42C filled out because you're receiving additional compensation. Can we write that down? That's a way better scenario. I should have thought of that before. All right. Purchase and sale agreement. Believe it or not, there's hardly any changes. For the purchase and sale agreement, where is it in the notes? I mean, basically, they just changed some of the verbiage. On the line 16, where you mark buyer represents or buyer represented by and seller represented by, there is a limited dual agent now. Because if it says buyer / listing broker, so that part has changed. And that I think there's one other. For on page 4, notices and delivery of documents. It basically says before I have to email the firm and the broker. Well, if the party is unrepresented, it now makes their email legal to receive it, and that will constitute as delivery because they don't have a firm on their side. That makes sense?
So that wasn't on there before, that unprecedented, unrepresented, right?
Correct. The highlighted section is what's
That
added.
was what I talked about. I mean, if I had a buyer that wanted just, represent themselves, I just mark that on the purchase and sale agreement, correct?
Oh, no, unrepresented has always been on section 16.
Say again?
On page 1, section 16, unrepresented has been there.
Oh.
That's not new.
Okay.
But
Don't remember it being out there.
regarding the email and the notices, now it clarifies that constitutes delivery.
So a past client, well, I'll just wait till this.
Okay. T, so page 5, paragraph T, where it's highlighted, all parties acknowledge the receipt of the pamphlet entitled Real Estate Brokers in Washington. Paragraph U, the compensation offered to the buyer broker firm, if any, is set forth in specific term number 17. And it talks about sharing of commission between the firms. Okay, so yes.
I have a question from Jamal. I've got a listing under contract. Buyer's agent left the box unchecked for pay as offered blank. What are the implications for my seller?
We got a situation like this going right now. Technically it could be that the other broker, there's an argument that there's no commission to be received, compensation. So that box has to be checked. We have another situation that closed a week ago and escrow is holding all the commission because brokers disagree on the distribution of commission.
But what happened to the rule that whatever is published, that's what the commission is? That's what the MLS rule used to be.
Okay, well, the scenario that we have that we're actively working on now, the published commission is variable. It says that if you aren't present for showings and then it's 1%. So the other firm is arguing, but what you're saying is that we're going to operate as what's published. And unfortunately, we're on the firm that's arguing that point. And I'm saying, but 2 things are published.
Yeah.
And your broker didn't mark the box. The actual commission percentage is written in, but there's no box checked.
But that's on the, so I've used that form on my listing saying that if agent isn't present, open house, blah, 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 showings, commissions shall 1%. That's a showing restriction form that's attached to the MLS,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But even though I published the 3%, So isn't it on the buyer broker to make sure that he has or she has reviewed all of the documents, or as a listing agent, should I say, see attached, moving forward, see attached MLS docs for commission or compensation, or what should I, because I'm a fan of that form.
Yeah. Where this one is muddy is because the full rate is on the first page of the purchase and sale agreement. The buyer broker put that they were to receive this full amount, that they didn't check the box.
Got it.
Our broker is arguing they didn't perform to earn that rate. Now, if the box was checked, our broker wouldn't have an argument.
Mhm.
But we're not even through that one yet because escrow is still holding the funds.
Okay.
And it would go to interpleader if we all can't decide. So for the purchase and sale agreement, it's actually quite minimal, okay? So the major changes are gonna be to your buyer broker service agreement, the amendment, the termination, the listing agreement. The 42C. I know we talked about this before, but just some best practices. The pamphlet, okay? You need to have a process, okay? If I were in your shoes, I would probably have a process of a welcome email to my buyer. Roche has a fabulous one. The MLS has a great sheet on important information for home buyers. This is a summary of the new laws that you can give your buyers. And then you have your pamphlet.
Is that available for us to email like now?
Yes.
So the sheet that's up there, the important information is,
Yeah, that's why I meant the other one.
But the other one, no.
No,
See, it's
only-
because it's not effective until
only
January
April,
1st.
January 1st.
Yeah,
Then, sorry,
I don't-
also is the new 41, that's only January 1st.
No.
So we're not really able to get the new one signed until January 1st.
Correct.
So do we get like the old one signed or just wait January 1st?
Wait till January 1st.
Wait, that one right there is the
If you're working with a buyer. now.
agency?
Yeah, I've been working with the buyer now, so that.
So, hold on.
That's the new bar, agency pamphlet,
Agency law,
agency law?
yes,
If I'm working with a new buyer now, then the old one's okay, or I have to get a new one.
until
signed?
January 1st,
So I have to get a new one. updated.
January 1st. It's pain, I know.
Okay.
It's a pain, but I just sent it out to a client now to say, like, it's my welcome email, like, hi, here's our welcome email. These are all the forms that you need to familiarize yourself with. So what I did last week is that we sent out the forms for your review. And now the next day, Lynn is going to send out for them to be signed or sent to sign. And so what my practice is I'm just gonna add that whole agency law to the buyer agency and like initial and kind of keep it moving. That's what my practice is gonna be, because I'm just gonna try to simplify the process with the buyer as much as possible to keep having to go back and like nickel and dime them for a signature. I'm just gonna
Yeah, I'm thinking if I
try
don't
and get it up
currently
front.
have the buyer agency agreement signed, then it sounds like it's just wait until January 1st.
Yes. So a couple things for best practice, okay? This is just best practice, okay? I halfway agree with Roche.
Okay, tell me.
I think after January 1st, okay, I would send a welcome email. Welcome buyer, right? You're so blessed to get to work with Shy Bundy. I would probably attach the information sheet and say that there's been a bunch of new laws. Part of these new laws is a broker service contract. I'll send that at a later date for signature. And here is your pamphlet. I really need a name for this. And here's your pamphlet. And then after I send that email, then I would probably send the Form 41 electronic signature. The reason I would do it two-step, Roche,
Okay,
is because technically this is supposed to be delivered before the buyer broker service agreement is signed. This has to come first, that has to come second.
Okay.
I would also say, hey, buyer, respectfully reply to my email to confirm receipt. So that would be my best practice. You could also include lead-based paint. You could include your lead-based paint pamphlet, right? You can make it whatever you want. Here's the beauty. You have about 45 days to figure out how you want to conduct your business. You can organize it all now so it's more streamlined, just like your listing presentation is. And I believe I said this before, but if you're currently, after January 1st, working with a buyer and either of you want to terminate the contract, save the sent form 53. And even if the buyer doesn't sign it, save that. So you have your paper trail.
If they don't sign it, your compensation after expiration continues, sounds like.
Well, there's a tail clause on all of these, but I think it's going to come down to the intention. I mean, that's up to a judge to decide. But if a buyer says, I text Steve 5 times telling him I didn't want to work with him anymore, then
Not worried about me. I'm gonna terminate. They're gonna go work with another agent. I don't wanna work with them, but if they don't sign it, then they buy that same house I showed them.
well, that's a little bit different. Because I mean, if you severed the agency relationship, you would then be making a procuring cause case. So apples and oranges, a little bit. So, excuse me. In the MLS class that's taught by Jeannie Simpson, who used to be a John L. Scott in-house attorney, and Andy Matthews, who used to be a John L. Scott in-house attorney, so they're wonderful. The scenario was given that Vu's the buyer and Vu has 5 non-exclusive buyer broker services agreements signed. Okay, because he can do that because they're all non-exclusive. And I show Vu a house 10 times, he can write it up with anybody else that he has this non-exclusive. That then triggered me to ask, is there still procuring costs? And yes, there is.
Oh,
So that's a whole different ball of wax through the MLS that we have to go after for compensation. Now, if Vu had signed an exclusive, then Vu could potentially owe the compensation. Okay? Because he breached his contract and went with someone else. Existing contracts. This you need to know. If you have an active listing that goes over into the new year, okay, active listing, you have to have a Form 18 signed January 1st or after because of the seller's consent to limited dual agency. Okay? Have an active listing, this is the first of the year, have to get a Form 18 signed. If you have buyers that you're currently working with right now, and whether they don't have a buyer agency or you do have a buyer agency, come January 1, you have to get a new 41 signed.
As if you're in contract.
Right there. If you are in a pending contract that is going to close after January 1st, get a new 41 signed. Now, for my wonderful analytical people out there, they tend to be cougars. if you read the legal bulletin, you're gonna hear some conflicting information from what I'm saying. The MLS, I'm just gonna be super transparent, because, right, this whole thing's about transparency. The MLS says if you have an active or a pending transaction that goes into the new year, you do not need to get a 41 signed. That is not in alignment with the law. Okay, we have MLS rules, right? But then we have the law, and the law says in order for the firm to get paid, you have to have this form. So get the form signed, okay?
Because escrow will come back and say, no, your form, we can't give you your commission, right?
So that's a big question mark. I have reached out to 4 different escrow companies that I know very well. And I've said, what is your expectation with this? And everybody's figuring it out. So I'm not sure where it would stop if there's a problem. If this is on escrow, amen and hallelujah. But if that means it's on escrow and I'm a listing broker, escrow has to say, hey, Shy, you have to send me your listing agreement. Because that's the service agreement. All buyers and sellers have to have a broker service agreement. That's either a listing agreement or the old buyer agency agreement. So if escrow is in alignment with the law, if the onus is on them, but we don't know that yet. The law states without a broker service agreement, the firm can't be paid. So this is a big question mark as to who's responsible for what.
What about your off-market deals that Lou is my past client? He calls me and says, hey, Rashida, I'm gonna sell my house, but my neighbor's gonna buy it. We have it all worked out. I'm gonna pay you a 2.5% or 3% commission. Can you just come and write up the deal? What is the best practice for that transaction?
Who are you representing?
Maybe no one.
That I don't have an answer to.
Okay,
yet.
well, let's just say I'm gonna represent the,
47.
just still use the 47, which I knew that.
Still
but-
use the form 47. Now, if you represent the buyer, then you'd use a 41.
Right, so
And-
then, but so in my purchase and sell agreement, because I don't have a listing agreement now, so I'm just gonna use the 47. And I'm gonna use the purchase and sell agreement, and I'm gonna check that the buyer is unrepresented.
Yes. And there's no SOC. Your compensation,
It's just whatever the seller's paying.
and would be dictated in the form 47.
Yes.
Now, what I don't know, another question, is, and we don't do this often, and I do not encourage it at all, is if both parties are unrepresented. Because how do I do a form 41, a buyer broker service agreement, if I'm not providing representation? So that is a question mark.
Well, yeah, because what if the seller, or what if you just meet somebody, and go like, yeah, just what if I write this up? And
Facilitate.
nobody, I'm a facilitator, and nobody is is represented. But this person is still willing to pay me a commission.
Correct. So there's still, what's the form number? 41C. 41C will dictate the commission. So you
Yeah.
always want that.
Okay.
And right now, I would just say, check unrepresented, make sure everybody has an agency law brochure. And make sure, and the reason I do not encourage facilitating is because there is something called implied representation, right? We get in our groove, and let's face it, we talk a lot. Too much sometimes. So I don't recommend facilitating, because you're probably implied representing without even realizing it, because you're just in your groove. So off market is very similar when you're representing one side or another.
And does the old sell by owner form just go away? I haven't seen it in a while.
Wasn't that a Camus form?
That was the cam, I mean.
No,
I just-
that was not a canvas form. That was a old Tingval John L. Scott form.
Oh, okay,
From
yeah,
back-
but
We
it's
don't-
gone. That's-
Probably,
gone.
It's been
yeah.
gone.
So we are aware of what to do with current contracts, listings, buyers, or contracts going into the new year.
If I have a listing. Sign, if the listing, I represent the seller, we're under contract before the end of the year. We move into the new year, but we have not closed yet. Do I need to get a Form 18 signed by the seller?
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm,
Wait, say that again, Carl?
hold on.
Yeah.
If I represent the seller, I get mutual before the end of the year, but it doesn't close till after the end of the year. Do I need a Form 18 signed by the seller?
Let's double check with the attorney. I think no.
Okay.
And the reason why is you're gonna be in a pickle if you're dual.
Yep.
And then you have to have it signed because they're consenting to limited dual. But if you're not dual, the only part that you have to have signed is about dual, and if you're in contract, you either are or you're not. So I'm gonna say, no, you don't have to have it signed unless you're currently a dual. And if you are a dual and the seller says no, because they actually get an explanation of what it means, you're in a pickle. Then you can refer it to somebody and fill out the 42C to say you're collecting more commission.
What if we're in a Jerry Howard situation where I'm representing the seller but not the buyer? Do you need that for clarity?
Well, because the question was about a listing, which would mean I represent the seller.
Right.
Which if it's active and I go into the new year, I have to get an 18 signed.
Right.
But
I'm saying I'm under contract with where I represent the seller and an unrepresented buyer.
no, because you're not dual.
Okay.
But we're gonna get clarification on
Okay.
that. But I'm gonna lean towards no. If you represent a seller and you go into the new year with a pending deal, you don't need an 18 signed. Okay. All right, we went through our best practices. Now we have scenarios. So hold on tight. You meet a potential buyer at an open house. And the home isn't a right fit, but you know of a home around the corner. But everybody has some things to do, so you set up a time to go look at it later. And you go look at that home and maybe that's not the right fit. Hold on, I'm winging it. I should gotta stay on the story problem. And then you show that scheduled house and then you add 2 more. They fall in love with house number 2 that you showed them. And they want to write an offer. When do you have your buyer broker service agreement signed? Met you at an open house, scheduled an appointment to show you house 1. Then I showed you 2 more after.
Before showing
Yeah.
house 1.
Before you shut down.
Can you? Would you sign it? Me neither. So there's no right answer, okay? So number 1, and everybody missed this. Ask the buyer if they've already signed a contract with someone else. Okay? Because you don't want to get your buyer in no pickle if they've already signed an exclusive agreement with VU. But maybe they're non-exclusive with VU and they can sign contracts with everyone else. And this is where you have to find your script. Now, people have asked me for a script, and that's impossible. It's just every scenario is so different. So if I'm giving you an example, okay, and Rashay comes in, I might have something in my open house about the new laws. Because other people probably don't. Right? And then I'm going to say, hey, Rashay, I'd love to show you these homes, right? But I think Rashay and I are going to have a long-lasting relationship. So I might not say anything in the first house. And then before the second house, I might say, hey, I don't know if you remember seeing this information about this new law, but the law dictates that I have to have this form signed. And maybe I have her sign a 1-day. Maybe I have her sign a non-exclusive. And then I said, Rashay, I really would like to work with you and help you through this. My general process would be to meet with you and go through a buyer consultation to kind of educate you on the process make you aware of the importance of why you need representation when you're buying a home, and then we can get into more of a formal agreement. How does that sound? Okay. Just to be clear, you started offering broker services when you opened the door to the first house. Okay? It has to be reasonably practical. That big gray terminology, okay? What do you do if they don't sign it? Rashay says, I seen house one, Shy, I'm not signing anything. What do you do?
Don't show,
What?
don't show.
I
The
mean,
house too.
you have to use your best judgment. Because her circumstances matter, right? So if she's just given me the cold shoulder and maybe has an attitude or, you know, thinks I'm like this commission breath car sales person, I might say we're not the right fit. Right? If she's not willing to do this 24 hours, non-exclusive, or I say, you know what? It's not reasonably practical for me right now. She's not comfortable. But I feel like if I spend some more time with her and then I get her to a consultation, then she will be. So it's not, there's not a hard line in the sand. Okay. Now I will tell you though, if Rashay is on house 5, 6, 7, 8, I probably crossed the line there. Okay. And if Rashay is still not willing to sign it, what does that say about her willingness to want to work with me?
So what's the best practice? I mean, I know what you're gonna say. So if you're at an open house and it's a house and the buyer walks in and goes, I want to make an offer and I don't have an agent, and can you write it up and can we do it today?
Are you the listing broker?
Yeah, I'm the listing broker. So depending on the guy, I guess, you know, I gotta look at my listing agreement, right?
Step one.
And step one, and then, if that's not limits initialed or whatever, then I talk to the seller, blah, blah, blah. So let's just say now I'm in front of my computer and I'm gonna craft this, offer. Do I send the form 41C, the broker services first? And then come back and do the offer
Yes,
and not do it all together?
correct. That's imperative. For me, okay, I'm gonna put my Shy Bundy hat on. I would have a pretty darn good paper trail. Okay, I would, if it was me, and I don't want to take a left-hand turn yet. We're still working on Sky Slope, okay? But if it were me, I would probably be keeping some notes. Now, we're supposed to, because I know we all do, keep all of our correspondence, our texts, our emails. I would probably be emailing myself, and I have a file for all my clients, right? And I would say, met Rashay at an open house today, showed her one property. She didn't want to sign this buyer broker agreement. We're meeting tomorrow. Showed her one more house. She wouldn't sign. I sent her an email. Like, and I'm a huge voice texter and voice emailer, right? If you guys have received emails from me, they're probably that big because I don't do this long of emails. But you could just voice it to yourself. And we don't know when or how this will be a problem until there's an audit or someone's trying to hold compensation. And I don't say that to scare you, but if Rashay is maybe being a little difficult, that's probably when I'm going to kick it into high gear and make sure all my ducks are in a row. Okay. Now, with a cold, like I don't know her, I don't have a relationship, I might have to do a little bit of a different dance. And I might have to revise my script and what I'm saying. And y'all run your own business. You can meet in a group. We can help out any way we can. I don't feel comfortable offering just a script because there's too many variables. Okay. Situation number 2. You get a lead from your, oh, go ahead, Jared.
So I think a good practice would be to make sure you have your buyer's presentation with you when you go on that first showing.
Mhm.
I mean, you got them right there, and then, you know, and that way you can show your value right there and have them, you know, be a great test. If they just sign it right there, then you know, you're really ready to move forward.
Absolutely. I think you should have, at a minimum, Form 41s in your car. It's been a long time, but any of
Oh
us.
my gosh. Remember the file boxes?
Yeah, just have a phone.
With all the forms,
One under
You
my
don't
desk
have
right now.
huh?
I have one under my desk.
A milk crate.
Okay.
I did. I always had a milk crate. How many deals have you written on the hood of your
Oh,
car?
boy, yeah. And then back when you didn't have auto sign, where you had to drive out to someone's house to present the offer.
Yeah.
None of you
I just gotta
hardly anybody
remember
here
right,
remembers
the
that.
fax machine were like, you could fax your offer.
Yeah.
I owned 3 fax machines and I would give them to my clients during the
Yep.
transaction, so I didn't have to
Yep.
drive to their,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, well, we did that
That
same
saved
thing.
me, they were like,
You must took that same class, cause I
I
remember.
didn't know that, true.
Oh, no.
okay, scenario number 2, okay? You get a lead from your website. Okay, buyer is requesting information on a particular house. You set up a time to show them the house. Wasn't the right house for her. The house is not the right fit. And you continue to follow up and you just have a feeling they're just window shopping, right? They're just not that serious. Month later, the same thing happens. They reach out, they want information about a house, they want to show it, see it. It's not the right fit. Same gut feeling, not really serious. There was a month in between. Couple weeks later, same thing happens, but you show them the house and now they want to write it up. When should you get your buyer broker service agreement signed?
Day before.
Or the before you send over the.
It's like day before.
We can't pull Jerry and Rashee's files when we get audited.
Got it. Put them on the list.
That's been true for a long time.
That's, I mean, but what if they wouldn't have signed it when you first met us that month ago,
Mhm.
right?
And they might not have, and that's okay. But if you're really good and you have a paper trail that you emailed it to them with your welcome package, you know, and you sent it to them for electronic signature and they didn't sign it, and then you didn't continue to work with them for that month, then I can't see, I mean, I'm not a judge, but I can't see you did anything wrong. But it absolutely would have to be signed before you write the audit.
Right.
Okay, a couple of other things with this is if you would have just had the standard 41 signed, it's only good for 60 days. So keep that in mind as well when you're doing these things and we're going through these scenarios. But I mean, I would say, and this is not like a definitive statement, but really try to get it signed before you enter house 2. I mean, if I had to have a general rule, that would be my general rule. That's my effort.
There's a house to our second showing.
Yeah.
Either one, either one.
If you take somebody out to show them a house and prior to showing it to them, you have them sign the 1-day buyer brokerage service agreement,
Mhm.
and you get a call back the next day from them saying, you know what, we want to write it up. Do I need to have them sign a new buyer brokerage service agreement?
There's an addendum to extend it, but
Okay.
there's also a tail provision on the 41. If you did a 1-day, hold on, that's a great question, Colin. So the term, it all depends on what time of the day, I guess. If it's 1 day, because it says, if this agreement expires while the buyer is a party to a purchase and sale agreement and represented by buyer brokerage firm as indicated on the purchase and sale agreement, the term shall automatically extend until the sale is closed or the purchase and sale agreement is terminated. So if you have a 1 day and your client gets in contract within 9 o'clock of the following business day, you would not need it signed.
Okay.
If it's 2 days, you should have an amendment,
And that's if I don't have mutual by 9 PM.
correct?
That's why.
Hey, Shy,
Yes,
do the same computation of times apply to the buyer's agency agreement?
correct,
So 2 days is on Friday is actually Tuesday.
correct.
Okay.
Oh.
Negotiate on the weekend is what you're saying.
So here's the scenario that I am most nervous about, okay? Because here's the thing. The DOL, when this becomes an issue, in my humble opinion, will be looking for trends. So if this is a one-off thing for you, I think you'll be all right. But if this, you get a little loosey-goosey and you're getting these signed right before you're writing offers, that's a trend. So let's say Rashay gets super lucky and she sits 3 open houses in 1 month, and all 3 open houses, she finds a buyer that wants to write it up, regardless of if it's her listing or somebody else's. And she has this 41 is signed, and 5 minutes later, she's writing a contract. And she does this 3 times in a month. If I was Rashay, I'd be writing myself a little scenario about each of these incidences, so we could defend her if she was ever accused of a trend. But here's the one that makes me a little nervous. The holidays are coming up, and a family member asks you about a property that is currently on the market, and they're super interested, but they think it's grossly overpriced. And the next week, there is a substantial price reduction. And Brad's cousin says, "Be Brad, can you show me this house?" And you're thinking, she's my cousin. You got to get that signed. Now, part of it is going to be easier because it's your cousin or your family member or your best friend. Okay? But don't get loosey-goosey where you stopped asking to get it signed beforehand. Because I think that's where people are going to trip up a little bit. Rashay got lucky at an open house. She got this Form 41 signed right before. Now her cousin wanted to see a house, and oops, she forgot. So that's something you need to have a 41 ready to go. Okay? Friendly reminder. All contracts have to be turned in within 2 days of signature. Now, what will happen with Sky Slope? We don't know. Corporate is working on the back end with Sky Slope because we can't create a transaction without an address. So there is a workaround that we can use if we need it, but you have to submit your buyer broker service agreements within 2 days. Your buyer might not buy a house for a month.
Do you have a Sky Slope rent and permit account?
We do, and that's the backup.
Okay.
Shh, don't tell them. There's a Band-Aid fix, but we're trying to simplify it. And just friendly reminder, it applies to your listing agreements too. Okay, now I know a lot of us have gotten out of this habit where I get a listing agreement signed and then I put it into Sky Slope the week we go on the market. That's not okay. And the DOL, we've gotten, pretty lucky in the last few years because of darn COVID, where they've been a little bit loosey-goosey on some things. And now they are not going to be loosey-goosey on things. We don't even know. The last 3 audits we've had have looked substantially different. We've had people just walk in and Colin and I have to drop everything. And then we have to go collect. The good thing, because both of us have worked here for so many years, we know whose files to people with assistants. They're the cleanest. We went through audits during COVID And they've given us a list. And then when we had enough time to go to the broker and say, oh, where's your Form 17? Okay. That took a tremendous amount of work from Colin to do. But we've done really, really well with that. We don't even know what the new audits are going to look like, but we are due for one.
We kind of know.
Okay.
One of the nice things about being part of John L. Scott Corporate is that we get to hear from the other offices about what they're going through. And we've been hearing about it from Redmond, from Mercer Island, from all these other offices, and they're focusing on contract turn-in time and communications. And that's a couple of the big points. They're focusing on the other things too. Like they're never gonna stop looking at earnest money receipts. Like that's gonna be the trend for life. But they're hitting some sore spots, is what I'm saying. And that's what I'm hearing from the other office managers and what we're hearing from our res ops division about this is what we're going through. These are the questions they're answering right now. So who knows what they're gonna, now that this comes out, who knows what they're gonna start asking for in January. But that's what they've been asking for.
Shy, you said they asked for or you guys said they asked for communication when they audit your files?
Yep.
What is the required communication that needs to be in the files?
All of your communication logs, emails, texts.
All relevant to the transaction. You don't have to have like,
How was your summer?
yeah, or what time do you want to meet at the house? But anything related to negotiation, pricing, positioning, wants, needs,
Feedback,
desires, yeah.
marketing.
Yeah,
It's all supposed to be there.
you're technically supposed to have
What? Or I've always forwarded to my, you guys store.
That's perfect. That's exactly what you're supposed to do.
So here's my question. For all of those text users that don't use WhatsApp, okay? Do you go through and screenshot all of your texts and then send them to your SkySlope email address?
Yeah.
And I'm not,
Enough examples.
I don't use WhatsApp, so I'm not saying, I'm not promoting that. I just know there's a lot of brokers here. Some of our higher producers use WhatsApp because you can actually email the entire chain of correspondence to your SkySlope account. Okay,
There's another option.
great.
So I know this is gonna sound really weird, but text messaging is email in disguise. If you go into your text messaging app right now, whether you're Android or iPhone, and where you put the phone number, you put your John L. Scott email address, and you type in a text message and hit send, that will appear in your email.
The whole chain?
No, just the one. So here's what you can do to simplify.
Mm.
You talk to your clients and you say, hey, I'm gonna set up a group chat. And in that group chat's gonna be me, the two of you, and this other SkySlope email address that I will record our text messages, because I'm required by law to turn all these text messages into our file so the DOL can look through it at any time.
Hmm.
And if you put all three of those in there, every single text message that goes back and forth, so long as you all use that group chat, will end up in the firm file.
That's great.
Let's see.
And the SkySlope emails, like, is that, the same email every time or a different person?
So it's gonna be unique to the transaction. So when you log into SkySlope, when you create the transaction for the first time, whether it's a listing or a sale, up at the top, there's an email address and it's usually based on the address. So it's like, if the address is 1234 Banana Street, it'll usually be Banana Street 1234@skyslope.com.
So until you have that, then.
You're screenshotting full.
Yeah.
Okay. But remember, it's only if it's relevant to the transaction. So all the stuff beforehand about like,
Just like, hey, let's go see the house.
you wanna see blue houses or red
Yeah,
houses?
yeah,
Doesn't matter.
All right. So again, just one reminder. Having a good welcome email is gonna save you a lot of time and headaches. Having a stellar buyer consultation. You are going to thrive in this. Educating people. Because if y'all come to my open house, which means you're probably going to other people's, and I'm like, hey, thinking about buying or selling a house? And I'd figure out, don't ask me this question, I'd ran this to me somehow. there's these new laws. You really need to know. They're super important. If you have questions, give me a call. Because in all those other open houses they go to, nobody's gonna tell them about it. So as much as it can be uncomfortable, look for the opportunities. Do videos. If you've been struggling with, what can I do videos on? You could talk all day about this. You could do 130-second videos on what's needed for the new laws. You could write out a letter to your database. Do not include it with your happy holidays. But you could send this to your database with a cover letter. There's not a lot of new laws. Let me
Great
know
first
if you
of
have
the
questions.
year. Great first of the year mail.
Yeah.
New laws.
So look at this is where are the opportunities? Because anytime there's a shift, the top rises. Questions, comments. How are we feeling about the scenarios? Because I thought that was going to be way worse.
Hey, Shy, I've got one.
Okay.
Meet somebody in an open house and they're like, yeah, I went to this other open house last weekend. I signed a non-exclusive agency agreement. I'm happy to sign one with you too. When two non-exclusive agreements come in contact with each other, like over the same house, like, yeah, I went and saw the house with that guy, but he's out of town now. I want to go see it again, but now I need you. Like, now we write the offer. Closing day comes along. Those two agreements are gonna butt heads, right?
That is a tough one, and we will find out if there is two non-exclusive Form 41s. And the other broker showed it first. I say this is more of a procuring cause case. And there's a lot of variables with procuring causes. Brokers will call me and say, hey, a buyer wants to work with me and somebody showed him this home 2 weeks ago and they didn't know the guy, they don't like the guy, they don't want to work with the guy, but they want me to write up the house. And it's a business decision because I'm the kind of person, I'm a hustler and I'm like, I'm going to write it up. And if they come at me with procuring cause case, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Other people aren't that way. Other people want more of, if I'm going to do this hard work, I want a guarantee. So I think we're more into a procuring cause case. So my advice would probably be the same as it is now, where you're either a hustler and you're going to get it done and you'll deal with it if it comes up, or you back down and don't get any money. You know, so I think, but we'll ask the attorney her legal opinion, but that's my position.
So moving forward on January 1st, you meet somebody, your first question should be, if they want to go see a house, first question should be, do you have something signed with another agent? They say yes. Second question is it exclusive or non-exclusive? If it's non-exclusive, hey, be a hustler, race forward, whoever can get the sale closed first. If it's exclusive, then it's back off, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Great.
Other
Cool.
thoughts, questions, Norm?
What was your suggestion on a welcome packet for new leads?
So I would have a welcome letter. And I don't know if you guys have heard about ChatGPT, but it's extraordinary. Make sure it sounds like you. Okay. I would have a welcome letter. I would have the information, probably at least for the first 3 to 6 months of the year. I would have the pamphlet. I think I just named it myself. The pamphlet, the agency law brochure. If it was a buyer, I personally would probably include lead-based paint pamphlet because that's required as well. And my letter would say something along the lines of like, welcome. I am so excited to work with you and help you on this home buying journey. You know, there's a legal aspect to this that, you know, we need to address. I would need a little time to finesse it. And let them know. Attached are the following. The law does dictate that I have to have a broker service agreement to work with a buyer. I will be sending that along Now, again, you have to be careful with this because the whole intention is transparency. So at some point, I hope you're having a conversation about what they're signing, or you have it done in person. I think the person, when a struggle comes up, right, whether it's a legal dispute or the person with the most details usually does better. So, hey, attorney that's coming after me, here's my welcome email. Here's my sent copy of when I sent them the Form 41. I showed them 3 homes, then they signed the 41. Like, you just have to have a good paper trail.
I know.
Steve,
You can have more than one exclusive if you're a buyer for the areas, right?
yes, good question. So Jamal, back to your question, if somebody signed an exclusive buyer brokerage service agreement, you could really get into the weeds to find out about the area. Because if I have an exclusive with Roche, I'm just gonna simplify, in area 500, Steve can have an exclusive with Roche in area 350. So yes, that is a great point. I don't know of anybody that's, like most people put King County or most people don't get that small, but it depends what the buyer's comfortable signing.
Is there an area thing of the 41?
Yeah, in the 41.
Oh, at the very top.
Yeah, you can put unlimited
You get it unlimited?
covers, yeah, you can still use the thing.
Oh, unlimited are filled in.
Yeah.
Is it fair to ask like any news about like the lawsuits or anything going on?
I don't have any information about that, but one thing that I will say that really blew my mind, because a lot of people have strong feelings about all of this, and I've heard from a lot of brokers like, oh, why does the Northwest MLS have to be a trailblazer? Why do we have to do all of these things? 17 other states,
I heard that there are copycat ones all over the place.
yeah, are requiring similar. We are not a trailblazer in that regard, which that really shocked me. But I think for brokers that have goodwill and good intention and are running their business, y'all are going to be fine. We have all met those slimy brokers out there that seem to be pulling the wool over everyone's eyes, and they're always they're the ones that are going to have a problem. But I do think in a situation like this, when there are more rules, you are going to possibly have these discount brokers that aren't following the rules. And I think that's why it's important to educate people, because the news is not going to do it. But to say, hey, if a broker's working with you and showing you multiple properties and you haven't signed a form, they're not compliant with the law. If they're not compliant with the law to protect their own license, what is their standard for you, buyer? Bam.
Opportunities.
That was like mic drop right there. All right. Anything else? I'm like, ooh, I didn't think I'd be under time. So
I got one more.
Jamal, go for it.
Back at the big meeting with Annie, you said when you're talking about compensation with your buyer and they're signing the 41 regarding compensation, let's say you do say, look, we're going to put 2.5% because, in the event they're offering 0 at Lennar, I'm getting my 2.5 from you. Buyer gets squeamish. You said, I remember, but let them know they're always in the driver's seat and always in control. Even if they're signing this now, there's ways to navigate out of that in the event that they don't want to pay you. Could you touch base on that?
Well, yeah. And I think in the new 41, it spells out different scenarios. So in paragraph 6 of the Form 41, it says if the seller's offer equal to compensation. So if I said, hey buyer, my fee is 30,000 and the seller pays 30,000, awesome, it's addressed. If my fee is 30,000 and the seller's offering 40,000, I have already worked that out with my buyer. Okay. If the compensation is less than my 30,000, I've already worked it out. So there's nothing for the buyer to fear having to pay, because we've already talked about if the compensation is equal to my fee, or if it's less, or if it's greater. The same would apply to if there's no compensation offered, right? And there also is an other form, okay? We are not attorneys, don't practice law. But if you had to write something to put the buyer at ease that is in alignment with your business practices, you can do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess the hypothetical I'm thinking of is, since industry standard tends to be 2.5% right now,
Well, we don't say industry standard.
I would never say industry standard, ever.
Not even on a recording.
Not even on a recording. So if a lot of people say 2.5, whatever, I'm with my buyer, I say, let's sign this 41 with 2.5. Then we go see Lennar at 0. And my buyer's like, whoa, now I've got to pay you 2.5%. I say, that's okay. Where's the safety net for them in that conversation?
Well, it says in the Form 41 how they want you to proceed with showing them homes that offers less. Like they can choose not to see homes. Like if I say, Jamal, my fee is 30,000, you can say in the contract, don't show me homes that offer less than 20,000. Because if it offers 20,000, I can pay the 10,000 difference. I have that amount of money, but that's already been addressed in the contract.
Okay.
Michelle.
So Jamal, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so let's say you have that conversation and it's 30,000 and Lennar's offering 0, but your client still wants to see it. That's what the 41A is for. So if you want to come back and amend your original agreement with your buyer, that's when you have that conversation and use that form to adjust. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it does.
And you should also have a second conversation with the buyer's lender to make sure that they could even go see it in the first place, because they might not be able to afford that one if they have to bring that much more money to the table.
Correct, absolutely.
So, oh, no, you go ahead.
On 41, 8, it says like showing properties, it says for which there is no seller's offer. Does that mean like 0, or does that mean like if it's just lower?
Well, so it says buyer broker shall or shall not be obligated to show properties to buyer for which there is no selling offer and buyer has not agreed to pay the compensation. So
8.
8A.
8A.
So
Yeah.
it's saying if there's 0 or if it's.
And the buyer has said, I can't pay you
I
the
want to pay
difference.
Okay.
And so that's a good scenario of Lennar Homes. Now, again, you guys, there's a contract, right? I get it. And we need to make sure that our contract is in alignment with our business practices and our buyers. But remember, don't just think about the contract. This is about helping a buyer find a home, right? We can have conversations to say, we can ask, depending on their financing, hey buyer, we can fill out the amendment and we can try to offer $10,000 more. So this amount doesn't have to come out of your pocket. You just make sure you get the amendment signed before you write the offer. So we're not in stone here, but remember, we're talking about helping people achieve the dreams of homeownership. For sure.
So under the showing, under 8, under B, listing, buyer broker shall bring listings to the buyer's attention of the buyer regardless of the seller's offer. Exception, so now if I have a buyer on a property tracker and they're getting these emails updated, right? But I've also put in here that says that, so do I need to do both? Because I say shall not show the buyer if there's no compensation, right? However, my property tracker has emailed Michelle on Lennar Home for some reason, and it's 0 commission. So now do I put here in B as well? Exception, see above or whatever, because now, because I brought it to, this says, shall bring to any attention and not showing.
Yeah, so that's almost saying like you'll send them property, it's almost saying you'll
Yeah.
send them properties that have 0 commission, but you're not gonna show it.
Yeah,
It's
So-
almost like,
Can we write that question down? That one's a little bit sticky.
yeah.
But I would say, just to keep in mind, if a situation presents itself and you don't feel like it's in alignment with what buyers have signed, that's what the amendment's for. Like, on January 1st, you know, when you're all here at the office on New Year's Day, I would be printing up the termination, the amendment, buyer broker service agreement, and having them in my car. I know that's crazy. It sounds like, you know, if we're going back to dinosaur ages, and a pen. I mean, you can email it to them, and I'm probably old school, but if all of these issues really stem about transparency, it's hard for somebody that signed it with a wet signature to say, I didn't know I was doing that. You know, if you send it electronically and you're a little, this happened really quick, write the email out and the box, you know, I mean, there's ways for you to just take one more step if you're feeling uncomfortable. Brett,
If you're working with a VA buyer. And you're signing a buyer brokerage service agreement, what's the best practice for paragraph 5 compensation and when, especially when compensation is not.
8C, it's addressed.
Yeah, I see that.
Due to VA regulation, if a buyer is obtaining VA financing, the compensation must be paid by the seller. So right off the bat, buyer can't pay. Okay, so you need to talk about, what if it's more? We always think, what if it's less? But what if it's more?
Mhm.
Then buyer, I mean, I think that's almost gonna be the harder part. If a buyer is saying, if I say, hey, my fee is $30,000. And if there's an overage amount, you're gonna have a lot of buyers who are like, I want that money. And then if it's less, you could put something in along the lines of, you know, having to negotiate that out with the seller. Maybe you have to increase the purchase price, but to Steve's point, you would have to check with the lender to make sure that's doable.
So you're saying in that sense, when it's less, you add in the other language for we have to go to negotiations with the seller.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
All right, how are we?
Everybody that Lennar homes are underpriced by $30,000. Because the law was created to reflect the value of homes more precisely. So why not just add 30,000 to your offer and then have them pay?
How are we feeling? Are we feeling better, worse, a little more clear? I have some things I have to work on. How are we feeling after this? Because this is the first go through with the class. We're gonna offer it a few more times. MLS, John L. Scott. I know for me, I've taken a few classes and I often leave like feeling a little overwhelmed. But preparing for this class really helped me like identify like, okay, these are the things that I really need to focus on, like my welcome email, that type of thing. So how are we feeling, Nor?
I think the hypotheticals are really good, and I think feedback on how different individuals think is really excellent, so it can just give you different word tracks.
I feel like I feel like you really have to sit down and dot your i's and cross your t's with this form and make sure that your conversation and language to the buyer is just super clear. And regardless of how you text it or email it, a buyer is always going to interpret it a different way if you get into a sticky situation. But the best practices obviously is to try and memorialize the conversation, as Colin said, through text or email. But I honestly think that it's just, it's really complicated. I mean, for an agent been in the business for 25 years, I mean, I get it, and you know, you should have all this signed and it protects you and the buyer, but I think with all of the forms and how they've made it with so many forms and the amendments and this and that, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It is, it's a lot. And I can see where regardless of the best practices or not, if the DLO is going to be looking at you or not, there's going to be some good agents that can get their hands slapped.
I mean, I don't remember the last time we had somebody's hand slapped by the DOL.
Been a long time.
I mean,
In a while.
for contracts, I've
Yeah.
had somebody's hand slapped for ethics complaint, but not. So I'm gonna throw a whole curveball at us right now because I just realized I forgot a page.
Can I say something before you do that?
Yeah.
When it comes to DOL and hand slapping, they don't like to do it. Like, for better or worse, DOL. Maybe they should slap a few more hands out there, but they're really reticent to slap hands. So we need to dot I's and cross T's, but you can't live in fear of that because they're not like, I gotcha.
Yeah.
They just want compliance.
Yep.
My only thought on that is I feel like it changes the buyer meaning from being like, oh my gosh, how exciting, we're going to houses, what kind of house do you want to look at? To like, now I want to go through this like long thing about commission and everything. So I feel like it kind of changes the buyer's meaning to, I'm sure I can like, it'll get better, but I feel like a new buyer, first time home buyer, instead of just being like, yay, we're gonna get houses, yay, it's gonna be like, oh, wow.
What if, because I've learned through this process, I like to hear different perspectives. What if it elevates your professionalism?
Yeah, what?
Because I have to sign a contract to work with the Van Pelt team because they're not just these like run of the mill brokers, you know, so really quick, I'm really sorry. Page 2 of your listing agreement. I was thinking, I'm like, gosh, where's that?
Breezed over it, I almost stopped you. I was like, wait, what the? Like,
Stop me.
yeah.
Talk about the commission on this page.
Yeah.
Okay, so page 2, listing agreement, paragraph 7, listing firm compensation. Okay, so you have your percentage or your dollar amount. If the buyer is not represented by a buyer broker firm, the listing firm compensation shall be X. Okay, I needed you to know this is a total LOC. This mistake is made all the time. It's not additional, it's total. Then you have your buyer brokerage firm commission. Okay, so going through what was typical, the cooperating member of the MLS. Or section 2, if the listing broker represents the seller and the buyer as a limited, it should be equal to subsection 7B. Or 3 is if checked, the offer to pay the buyer brokerage firm shall extend to licensed brokerage firms that are not members of the MLS, which the MLS just threw a monkey wrench and opened that statewide, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. And then buyer brokerage firm compensation shall be paid as set forth above unless modified by the buyer and the buyer brokerage firm and a mutually accepted purchase and sale agreement. The offered amount may not be withdrawn or reduced with respect to a buyer after that buyer or buyer brokerage firm has notified the listing firm or the seller of that buyer's intent to submit an offer, and for 3 calendar days thereafter. Buyer brokerage firm is as intended third-party beneficiary of this agreement. Okay, now going to C, and this is a big one that's always been, but it's written out now. Seller acknowledges that there are no standard compensation rates and that the compensation in this agreement is fully negotiable and not set by law. In addition, seller acknowledges that the offering compensation to buyer broker firm is not required. Okay, there's a lot of brokers that are really nervous about this paragraph. This is what it's been for the last year and a few months. Okay, but now it says so. So this is where I believe not pulling the wool over people's eyes is very beneficial. Hey, seller. Just like we set the price of the home, we set the commission. This is what it's going to take to get your home sold. Look at all of these comparable properties. Look at the commission rate on these comparable properties. Obviously, that's relative. You have to decide how you're gonna go about that. But this is nothing different. It's just written in the contract. And then additional consent. Seller consents to firm receiving compensation from more than one party and to sharing the compensation between the firms, provided that any terms and amounts offered to or by the firm are disclosed as required by RCW. So again, all compensation is transparent. Now, there's a lot of people out there that think all realtors are millionaires, right? We make a ton of money. This Facebook post going around talks about, and I'm going to try to work on getting it in a somewhat printable format, talks about all the services provided by a broker. It's kind of like, think of our marketing plan on a listing presentation. And there's many of us that say we're going to install a key box because we do. But there is something going around that talks about how our pay structure actually works, how we are required to pay the firm that we work for, and the MLS, and the E-Key, and the Board of Realtors. You should probably start having something like that in your back pocket if you already don't. Many of us already have had that conversation, which is handling commission objections, but that paragraph is now in there. It's no change. It's just more transparent. I did go 2 minutes over. All right, anything else?
I'm
Yes.
so sorry. I don't know if I can hear.
Absolutely.
On the 41, like Colin was saying, if you put in, let's say, like as offered in MLS, then what would you do on the, like, if it's above or below, because now there's no above or below because it's just being offered from what it would be? Does that make sense? If you wrote in like other, you said like as offered in MLS, then
You would just do other on both boxes on B and C.
B and C, just other and say,
That means if it's over the amount, you get it. If it's under the amount, you get it. Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. If you need anything, let us know. There is a new John Scott buyer broker service agreement coming out, and I'll let you know when that happens. All right.
Shy.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jamal, do you have one more question?
Just a real quick one. My last question.
No, you're fine.
In the event we negotiate the buyer's commission, like call it 50 grand into the contract, how's that going to affect appraisal? Have we thought about that, or?
Oh, that's always an issue. I mean, it's the same argument if you were going to add funds to the purchase price to cover closing costs.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's always been something to be mindful of.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you.